The sky was painted in muted grays, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and wilted flowers. Helena had never been fond of cemeteries, but that day she had no choice. The funeral of her distant aunt had drawn her here, to this forgotten place on the outskirts of town. The last of the mourners had already left, yet she remained, staring at the gravestone with little emotion. Death always felt distant, unreal, until it wasn't. A soft sound broke the heavy silence. A faint rustling, like dry leaves shifting without wind. She turned her head, scanning the rows of tombstones until her eyes landed on a small, black figure perched atop an unmarked grave. A cat. Its fur was deep, velvety black, its eyes two golden slits that gleamed in the dimming light. It was completely still, sitting with an almost unnatural stillness, like a statue abandoned by time. The eerie contrast between the creature's dark form and the pale marble of the gravestone sent a strange shiver through her spine. "Hey there," she murmured, stepping closer. The cat did not flinch. There was something unnerving about its gaze. It wasn't the wary look of a stray or the hungry eyes of a beggar. It was watching her, studying her. The more she looked at it, the more she felt an odd pull in her chest, as if something deep inside her recognized the animal. She crouched down, hesitating. "Are you lost?" The cat blinked slowly. A cold gust of wind rushed past, making the trees groan, yet the cat's fur did not ruffle. A sinking sensation curled in her stomach, but she shook it off. "All right, I get it. You're a silent type." Reaching out cautiously, she let her fingers hover just above its head. The cat made no move to run or hiss. It simply allowed her touch, its fur oddly warm despite the evening chill. She hadn't planned to take it home, but something about leaving the cat behind felt wrong. The thought of it staying here, alone in the graveyard, unsettled her more than she cared to admit. "Guess you're coming with me," she whispered. The cat let out a slow, deep purr. It sounded almost human. The drive home was uneventful, but Helena couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone in the car. She glanced at the cat now and then, expecting it to move, but it remained in the same position the entire ride, sitting perfectly still, staring straight ahead. Once she reached her apartment, she set the cat down in the living room. It stretched lazily, finally breaking its eerie stillness, and walked around the space as if it had been there before. Helena watched as it made a slow circle around the room before stopping in front of the large mirror by the hallway. The cat sat and stared. She tilted her head. "Fascinated by your reflection, huh?" The cat did not react. Helena turned away, exhausted. The day had been long, and the weight of it pressed heavily against her shoulders. She didn't even bother preparing dinner. Instead, she changed into an oversized sweater and collapsed onto the bed, letting out a sigh as she buried her face in the pillow. Minutes passed. Then she heard it, a faint, rhythmic tapping. She lifted her head, frowning. It was coming from the living room. Heart pounding a little faster than she liked, she got up and padded toward the sound. The apartment was dimly lit, the only glow coming from the streetlights outside. The cat was still sitting in the same place, but now its tail flicked against the mirror. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was unnerving, deliberate, as if it was trying to get something's attention. Helena exhaled sharply. "You're kind of weird, you know that?" The cat didn't react. It just kept watching the glass. Feeling an uneasy chill creep up her spine, she reached down and picked it up, carrying it away from the mirror. "Okay, bedtime for you." The cat did not resist. She placed it gently at the foot of her bed and climbed under the blankets, telling herself she was just tired. The strange events of the night would seem less eerie in the morning. At least, that's what she thought. Because as she closed her eyes and drifted into sleep, she failed to notice the mirror in the hallway shifting ever so slightly, as if something inside had moved. And the cat? The cat was wide awake. Morning came with an eerie stillness. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting long, golden lines across Helena's bed. She stretched, rubbing her eyes, feeling the weight of a restless sleep still clinging to her bones. The cat was curled at the foot of the bed, seemingly asleep. For the first time since she had brought it home, it looked normal. Small. Harmless. Maybe she had overreacted last night. She got up, stepping lightly across the cool wooden floor toward the kitchen. As she passed the hallway mirror, a strange flicker of movement caught her eye, something subtle, barely perceptible. She stopped. Her reflection stood perfectly still. She frowned, stepping closer. No, it was just her. Sleep deprivation was playing tricks on her mind. She turned away, shaking off the uneasy feeling, and continued into the kitchen. She made coffee, the comforting scent filling the apartment, and checked her phone. A few unread messages from coworkers, a reminder for an overdue bill, and a notification from her favorite bookstore about a new horror novel release. She was about to sip her coffee when she heard it. A soft, deliberate tap. She turned her head slowly toward the living room. The cat sat in front of the mirror again, its tail flicking rhythmically. Tap, tap, tap. Helena narrowed her eyes. Okay, what's with you in the mirror? The cat did not turn toward her. It didn't even acknowledge her voice. It simply stared at the glass. An uncomfortable thought entered her mind. What exactly was it looking at? She hesitated before stepping closer, coffee cup in hand. The cat's ears twitched slightly, but it remained focused on its reflection. Or at least, that's what she thought, until she noticed something that made her stomach drop. Its reflection was slightly off. Not in any obvious way, but the angle of its head, the position of its tail, the way its whiskers moved. It wasn't a perfect mirror image. It was delayed, like a video feed with the slightest lag. A chill ran down her spine. She blinked hard, looking away for a moment to regain her composure. When she glanced back, the reflection was normal again. She let out a slow, shaky breath. I'm losing it. The cat, finally noticing her, let out a small chirp and trotted away from the mirror, rubbing against her leg as if nothing had happened. Helena exhaled, shaking her head. Maybe she was just tired. The rest of the day passed without much incident. Helena went to work, distracted by meetings and emails, and almost forgot about the strange encounter with the mirror. Almost. It wasn't until she returned home that the unease crept back in. As soon as she stepped inside, something felt different. The apartment was exactly how she had left it, except for one thing. All the mirrors were slightly tilted. Not enough to be immediately noticeable, but enough that when she stopped to really look at them, the angles felt wrong. The hallway mirror, the bathroom mirror, even the reflection on her microwave door. Her stomach twisted. She approached the hallway mirror cautiously, placing her hands on the frame and adjusting it back into position. Probably just the vibrations from the street, she muttered to herself. She walked into the living room, expecting to see the cat in front of the mirror again. But this time, it was curled up on the couch, seemingly asleep. She watched its slow, rhythmic breathing, forcing herself to relax. But then she noticed something. The cat's chest rose and fell in a steady pattern. But in the mirror, it wasn't breathing at all. A sharp, suffocating fear clawed at her throat. She whipped around, staring at the real cat, then back at the reflection. It was still not moving. She took a step back. The room felt smaller, the air thick, suffocating. And then, the reflection blinked. But the cat on the couch didn't. Helena's breath caught in her throat. She didn't dare move. The reflection tilted its head, ever so slightly, in the wrong direction. A wave of nausea hit her as she stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp. The crash shattered the silence, and the cat on the couch finally stirred, startled by the noise. When she looked back at the mirror, everything was normal again. The reflection matched reality. She pressed a trembling hand against her forehead. This wasn't normal. She needed sleep. Or at least, that's what she told herself. Because as she picked up the fallen lamp and forced herself to breathe, she didn't notice the cat sitting near the mirror again, watching. Sleep did not come easily that night. Helena lay in bed, her body exhausted but her mind restless. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt a creeping sensation, as if something was just beyond the edges of her perception waiting. The apartment was silent, save for the occasional hum of the refrigerator. She tried to focus on her breathing, to will herself into sleep. Then she heard it. A soft scratch. Her eyes snapped open. The sound was coming from the hallway. She turned her head toward the bedroom door, heart pounding. The apartment was dark, the only illumination coming from the faint glow of the streetlights outside. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Helena swallowed hard. She didn't want to get up. She didn't want to know what was making that sound. But then a low, guttural growl. The cat. She bolted upright, pulse hammering in her ears. She reached for the bedside lamp, flicking it on with trembling fingers. The growling continued, deep and primal, vibrating through the floorboards. She forced herself out of bed, legs weak beneath her, and stepped into the hallway. The cat was there. It was crouched in front of the mirror, ears flattened, back arched, tail puffed out in alarm. It was staring at its reflection with pure, unfiltered terror. Helena felt ice creep through her veins. "Hey," she whispered, hesitant. "What's wrong?" The cat did not acknowledge her. Its pupils were fully dilated, its body rigid, as if it were prepared to attack. Then she saw it, the reflection. It wasn't the cat, or at least, not exactly. In the glass, the cat's mouth was slightly open, revealing too many teeth. Its eyes were just a little too wide, too hollow, too wrong. A cold weight settled in Helene's stomach, and then the thing in the mirror blinked, out of sync. Her breath hitched. The cat in the real world remained perfectly still, but its reflection, it moved. And then, just as quickly, it was normal again. Helene staggered backward, nearly knocking over a chair. Her vision swam, her head spun. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. She grabbed the cat with trembling hands and turned away from the mirror. It was shaking, its tiny body quivering against her chest. She needed to leave the room. Now. But as she took a step toward her bedroom, a loud crack echoed through the apartment. She turned, her blood running cold. The mirror had split. A single, jagged fracture ran down the glass, splitting her reflection in two. Helene's breath came in ragged gasps. She backed away, gripping the cat tighter, her pulse a frantic drumbeat in her ears. The apartment was suddenly too quiet. The air felt thick, suffocating. The mirror was broken, but it hadn't shattered outward. The fracture had come from inside. She did not sleep that night, and the cat did not leave her side. Helene sat at the kitchen table, gripping a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. Her fingers trembled as she traced the rim of the cup, her mind replaying the events of the night before on an endless loop. The cat sat curled up on the chair beside her, quiet for once. No flicking tail, no eerie stares at the mirror, just a small, warm presence that reminded her she wasn't entirely alone. But the mirror. Her gaze drifted to the hallway where it stood, the crack running through the glass like a vein of decay. It hadn't broken further, hadn't fallen apart. It just remained. Something was wrong in this apartment, and she needed to find out what. She started with the obvious. She grabbed her phone and searched for any logical explanation. Optical illusions, sleep paralysis, stress-induced hallucinations. Maybe she had just imagined it all, but her gut told her otherwise. Feeling a growing unease, she switched tactics and looked up history of mirrors and superstition. She skimmed through articles on folklore and myths, her unease growing with each passage. Mirrors as portals, legends of reflective surfaces acting as windows to other realms. The belief that breaking a mirror fractures the soul, a crack could mean a passage had been opened. Ancient warnings never to let an animal watch its own reflection for too long. That last one sent a chill down her spine. Her cat had been staring at the mirror since the moment it arrived. Helene's stomach twisted. Was it watching something? Or had it been watched all along? She took a break from research and decided to step outside. The air in the apartment felt stale, like it hadn't been touched by fresh oxygen in days. She ended up at a nearby cafe, scrolling mindlessly through local forums, looking for, she wasn't sure what. And then, buried deep in an old thread about urban legends, she found something. A missing persons post from 2 years ago. A woman, mid-30s, lived alone. Disappeared from her apartment without a trace. No signs of forced entry. No clues. The only detail mentioned? Neighbors reported hearing strange noises coming from inside her apartment, like something moving in the mirrors. Helene felt ice in her veins. The listed address was familiar. It was her apartment. She slammed the laptop shut, her breath shaky. This was just a coincidence. It had to be. Except it wasn't. Because when she finally worked up the courage to go home, she found the cat exactly where she had left it, sitting by the mirror, staring. And its reflection? It wasn't sitting anymore. Helene's breath hitched. The cat sat motionless in front of the mirror, but its reflection had moved. It wasn't immediate, wasn't a dramatic, horror movie jolt. It was subtle, almost like a mistake, a glitch. The real cat remained still, tail curled neatly around its paws. But in the mirror, its tail lay straight, slightly twitching, as if caught mid-motion. Her skin prickled. She stepped forward hesitantly, her pulse a steady thud in her ears. She needed to test this, to prove to herself that she was imagining things. She clapped her hands. The real cat blinked, looking up at her. Its reflection didn't move. Helene's throat went dry. Slowly, so slowly, the reflection turned its head toward her. It didn't just mirror the real cat's movement. It looked directly at her, as if acknowledging her presence for the first time. Her body locked up. Her mind screamed at her to run. But she didn't. She reached for her phone, hands trembling, and opened the camera. If she recorded it, if she could just capture proof, maybe she could convince herself she wasn't losing her mind. She hit record and raised the phone. On the screen, her heart stopped, because there was no crack in the mirror. The mirror was perfectly intact in the camera view. No break, no fracture, like it had never been broken at all. Helena lowered the phone, looked at the mirror with her own eyes. The crack was still there. A nauseating, twisting dread filled her chest. This wasn't just a mistake. Something was wrong with the mirror, with her reflection. She needed to get out. The apartment felt smaller, heavier, suffocating her like a slow choke. She grabbed the cat, its body tense under her grip, and turned away from the mirror. She wouldn't look at it again. Not now. Not until she understood what was happening. As she stepped away, the air behind her shifted, like something moving, a whisper of motion. Helena froze. She didn't turn around. She didn't have to. She already knew what was happening. Her reflection had not turned away with her, and it was still watching her. Helena's body refused to move. Her instincts screamed at her, "Don't turn around. Don't look." But the weight of that unseen stare pressed against her back like a physical force. Her breath came shallow, uneven. The cat in her arms let out a low, uneasy growl. She swallowed, her throat dry as dust. If she turned, what would she see? Slowly, carefully, she took another step forward. And then, the mirror creaked. Not the frame, not the glass breaking further. It was the sound of something shifting inside. Something moving. Helena's stomach twisted violently. She squeezed her eyes shut and bolted for the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. She pressed her back against it, chest rising and falling in ragged gasps. She was losing it. She had to be. Her reflection wasn't real. It wasn't alive. And yet, it had stayed behind. The room was dark, save for the weak glow of a street lamp filtering through the curtains. The cat squirmed in her arms, claws digging slightly into her skin. She released it, watching as it leapt onto the bed and curled into itself, but its eyes never left the door. It was still growling. Helena ran a hand through her hair, trying to think. She needed to do something. Destroy the mirror? That seemed like the obvious solution. Smash it to pieces. But a deeper, more primitive part of her recoiled at the thought. Because what if breaking it didn't end this? What if it let something out? Her fingers tightened into fists. She needed to know more. She grabbed her laptop, opening it with shaking hands. Her earlier search on mirrors and superstitions wasn't enough. She needed something real, a connection to this specific place. Scrolling through old records, she found herself back on the missing persons forum. The woman who lived here before her. No trace. No evidence. No body. Helena's skin crawled. Her mind raced back to the night before, the way her reflection lagged behind her, the way the mirror split from the inside. Was that what happened to the last tenant? Had her reflection taken her place? The thought sent a violent shiver through her spine. She glanced at the bedroom mirror. A small, full-length one mounted on the closet door. Her reflection stared back at her, perfectly in sync. But for the first time, that didn't comfort her. She closed the laptop and forced herself to breathe. The mirror in the hallway was the problem. She couldn't ignore it. Helena stood, legs unsteady, and approached the bedroom door. She pressed her ear against it, listening. Silence. Carefully, she turned the knob and eased the door open just a crack. The hallway stretched before her, dimly lit. The mirror stood where she had left it. The crack was still there. But the reflection of her bedroom door was wide open. And inside, something was standing in the dark. Helena's heart stopped. It wasn't a perfect silhouette. It wasn't even fully formed. It was just wrong, a shape barely human, like a distortion in the glass. And it was looking directly at her. A sharp chill slashed through her spine. The cat at her feet hissed. The thing in the mirror moved, not as a reflection, independently. Helena did the only thing she could think of. She slammed the door shut. Her entire body was trembling. This wasn't just paranoia. This wasn't just exhaustion. Something was inside the mirror, and it was trying to get out. The cat pressed against her leg, tense and alert. She had to act fast, because now the whispering had started, and it was coming from the other side of the glass. The whispers grew louder. Helena pressed her back against the bedroom door, heart hammering as the sound slithered through the cracks. It wasn't a language, not words, just a low, indecipherable murmur, like voices layered over one another, speaking from behind the glass. The cat was rigid, its tail bristling, its ears pinned back. Something was coming. She had to move. Forcing herself forward, she grabbed her phone and opened the camera, desperate to see what the mirror looked like through the screen. She aimed it at the closet mirror. Her reflection was still there. But it wasn't just her. Behind her, in the camera's display, the hallway mirror was wide open, a gaping void of shifting shadows. And within it, a hand, long fingers too thin, too sharp, curling around the edges of the glass. Helene threw the phone aside. Her breath came in shallow gasps. She had seen enough. The mirror wasn't just reflecting anymore. It was opening, and something was trying to step through. The air turned thick, pressing down on her like an invisible weight. She could feel it now, the wrongness. A presence lurking just beyond the glass, watching, waiting. Then the whisper stopped, and a voice, one single, clear voice, spoke from inside the mirror. "Let me in." Helene's stomach twisted violently. She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. No, she wouldn't let it in. The cat suddenly let out a vicious snarl, launching itself at the mirror. Its claws scraped against the glass, its body rigid with aggression. The thing inside the mirror reacted. The glass shuddered, like water rippling from a single point. And then, her reflection smiled. Not a normal smile. Not a human one. A grin too wide, stretching too far, the skin pulling unnaturally at the corners of its mouth. Helene's breath hitched. Her reflection lifted a hand and waved. A simple, deliberate gesture, as if it were saying goodbye. And then, the lights flickered, the air shifted, and the cat, still clawing at the glass, vanished. A choked sound escaped Helene's throat. No. The cat was gone. She lunged for the mirror, pressing her hands against the cold surface. No, the reflection of the cat was still there. But in real life, it had disappeared. Her stomach twisted in horror. It had taken the cat. And now, the reflection wasn't just mimicking her. It was stepping forward. The crack in the glass widened. A hand reached out. Her own hand, but not hers. The exchange had begun. Helene staggered backward as the hand reached out of the mirror. It was hers, yet not hers, pale, elongated fingers, the nails slightly too sharp. The reflection stepped closer, its movements smooth, unnatural. Her breath caught in her throat. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating, like the walls were closing in. The cat was gone, taken, and now it wanted her. The reflection's lips curled into that too wide smile. Helene ran. She bolted for the bedroom door, but before she could reach it, the mirror shattered outward. A blast of icy air rushed through the room, knocking her to the ground. She gasped, crawling backward as shards of glass rained around her. The reflection was no longer inside the mirror. It was standing in the room. Her lungs burned as she scrambled to her feet. The thing, her other self, tilted its head, studying her with dark amusement. It moved toward her, slow, deliberate. Helene's mind raced. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't a hallucination. It was taking her place. Her pulse thundered. She darted toward the nightstand, grabbing the heaviest object she could find, a metal lamp. Without thinking, she swung. The lamp struck the thing's face with a sickening crack, but it didn't react, didn't flinch. Instead, it smiled wider and whispered, "You're too late." Something shifted in the air. Helene felt it before she understood what was happening. Her limbs grew heavy, her vision blurred. She stumbled, reaching out to steady herself, but her hand met something cold and smooth. Not the wall, glass. Her stomach twisted in horror. She turned her head and saw herself. She was inside the mirror. Panic surged through her as she slammed her hands against the glass. No. The reflection, her replacement, stood on the other side, watching with an eerie calm. It reached down, picked up the cat, the real cat, and cradled it in its arms. The cat purred, like it had always belonged to her. Helene's scream was soundless. She pounded against the glass, but the surface remained solid, unyielding. Her reflection raised a hand and turned away. She walked out of the room, the cat nestled in her arms. Helene watched, helpless, as her own body left the apartment. And then, darkness. Helene doesn't know how long she has been here. Time doesn't pass in this place. She sees the apartment, but it's wrong, hazy, distorted, like looking through rippling water. She watches her reflection live her life. It wears her face, speaks in her voice, and no one notices. The cat sits on the couch, content, unaware that its real owner is trapped in the glass. Helene tries to scream, to claw at the barrier between worlds, but the mirror no longer reflects her. She is just a shadow now, A whisper behind the glass. Waiting.